At 54, my name is Elena, and I believed I understood the nature of love completely. Marriage represented security, quiet nights at home, predictable patterns, a carefully constructed existence built on stability. I never craved adventure or unexpected moments. Excitement seemed unnecessary. At least that's what I convinced myself until one particular evening transformed my entire perspective. Such experiences never seemed possible for someone like me. I urge you not to repeat my error. It happened on a Thursday night, during one of those oppressive summer evenings when humidity makes the air thick and time seems frozen. My husband David had departed that morning for a 3-day camping expedition with his college roommate. The house belonged entirely to me, and I anticipated doing absolutely nothing productive. After a lengthy shower, I changed into my comfortable flannel nightgown, the faded purple one with tiny white daisies, worn soft from countless wash cycles, and settled onto the living room sofa with a glass of red wine and a familiar romantic film I'd watched countless times. This represented pure comfort, something dependable and known. Then the doorbell rang. 4 deliberate chimes, not aggressive, but confident enough to startle me. Nearly 10 o'clock, and visitors never appeared so late. I set down my wine glass, hesitated briefly, then walked across the hardwood floors and bare feet toward the entrance. Opening the door revealed him. Michael, David's younger brother's son. I hadn't encountered him for over 18 months, not since his father's memorial service. He appeared transformed, more mature, more defined, yet retaining that endearing uncertainty he'd always possessed. His brown hair was soaked, plastered against his scalp from the sudden downpour that had just begun. "Hi, Aunt Elena," he said, his voice deeper than my memory recalled. "Sorry for arriving unannounced. My cell phone died, and I was supposed to meet Uncle David here. He mentioned I could use the spare bedroom tonight if I got stranded. I didn't know he wasn't home." I stared, still processing his unexpected presence. He clutched a worn backpack, shoulders slightly curved, as if uncertain whether he should remain standing there. "Oh, Michael, absolutely. Please come inside," I said, stepping backward. "David's away until Sunday, but you're certainly welcome to stay." He gave a tentative smile and entered. The instant he crossed the threshold, I became acutely conscious of my attire. No undergarments, my nightgown clinging loosely, my hair still slightly damp. I wrapped my arms across my torso and managed a welcoming expression. "It's really coming down out there," I commented, attempting to break the quiet. "Yeah, it caught me walking from the subway station. Didn't expect the storm to arrive so quickly." I guided him to the guest bedroom and retrieved fresh towels from the hallway closet. He expressed gratitude softly and began drying his hair while I stood awkwardly nearby. "I'll give you space to get comfortable," I said. "If you need food, there's leftover chicken casserole in the refrigerator." "Thanks, Aunt Elena, I'm fine, just exhausted." But he didn't immediately close the door. He remained there, towel in hand, regarding me with a peculiar expression, part appreciation, part something I couldn't identify. His gaze held mine slightly, longer than appropriate. Perhaps it was my imagination. I retreated to the kitchen, attempting to dismiss the strange sensation settling in my stomach. It had been ages since any man had observed me that way. Later that evening, sleep eluded me. I kept replaying how he'd looked at me and how I'd felt standing there in my nightgown, suddenly visible again. I lay there studying the ceiling, listening to rain drumming against the glass. Near 1 a.m, I rose to pour another glass of wine. That's when I discovered him again. Michael sat on the couch in darkness, only the dim glow from the corridor light illuminating his profile. He glanced up as I entered the living room. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to frighten you." "Couldn't sleep either." I chuckled quietly. "You and me both." A pause filled with something neither of us acknowledged. I could have returned to bed. I should have. Instead, I chose the opposite end of the sofa. We conversed for hours about trivial matters and profound ones. His graduate studies, my vegetable garden, how rapidly years seemed to pass. The discussion flowed more naturally than I'd anticipated, and gradually, something transformed. I noticed how he observed my mouth when I spoke. how his tone lowered subtly when he asked intimate questions. I wasn't naive. I understood the boundary. I knew exactly where it existed. Yet I didn't retreat. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the isolation I'd ignored too long. Or perhaps it was something else, something deeper, something I hadn't permitted myself to experience in years. But I didn't cross that line. Not that night. The tension simply lingered like an unanswered question, and instinctively I already knew it eventually would be. The following morning, I awakened earlier than usual. The sky remained pale gray, the kind that makes everything feel hushed and uncertain. I wrapped myself in my old bathrobe and headed to the kitchen, trying to shake the peculiar heaviness in my chest. I didn't expect to find Michael already there. Barefoot, t-shirt wrinkled, hair still wet from his shower. He stood at the stove, stirring something in a skillet. The aroma of scrambled eggs and buttered toast filled the air. "Hope you don't mind," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Thought I'd prepare breakfast. You always used to cook when I visited as a child. Figured I owed you." I smiled, or attempted to. "You didn't need to, but I appreciate it." He gestured toward the coffee maker already brewing. "Coffee's nearly ready, too." I sat at the kitchen table, watching him in the gentle morning light. He seemed more like a grown man than I remembered, more confident. And yet that boyish quality remained. That tender way he moved, the careful way he spoke. When he placed a plate before me, our fingers touched. I felt it, sharp, brief, but undeniable, that unspoken awareness we both seemed to be avoiding. We ate mostly in silence, but it wasn't awkward. It felt intimate, familiar, yet new. After breakfast, he assisted with the dishes. The way he stood, beside me at the sink, drying plates while I washed, reminded me of old rhythms, things couples do quietly without thinking. And that's what disturbed me, because it felt like something we shouldn't be. When we finished, I offered him a clean towel and some detergent for his damp clothes. He thanked me again in that quiet, genuine way and disappeared into the guest room. I should have kept busy. I should have left the house. But instead, I found myself drifting into the sunroom, curling up in my favorite chair with my thoughts and the guilt I couldn't quite identify. By mid-afternoon, I heard footsteps behind me. "Hey," Michael said gently. "Can I ask you something?" I looked up. He stood in the doorway, arms folded casually, eyes searching mine. "Of course. Do you ever feel like you're just existing?" he asked. "Like you wake up, do everything you're expected to, smile when people want you to, but it's like you're observing your own life from outside?" I blinked, surprised by the question, surprised by how perfectly it captured what I'd never expressed aloud. "Constantly," I said quietly. He nodded, moving closer. "I feel that way too, especially recently. Like I'm trapped between who I was and who I'm supposed to become." I wasn't sure how to respond. There was something incredibly vulnerable about him in that moment, and something in me wanted to match it with equal honesty. "I used to feel very much alive," I said, "before routine, before obligations. I used to feel like my life belonged to me." Michael sat on the edge of the footstool across from me, his knees nearly touching mine. "I think you still have that in you," he said, his voice quieter now. "I can see it." My breath caught. I didn't know how to respond to being seen like that. He didn't move, neither did I. It wasn't about romance. Not exactly. It was something deeper, a kind of emotional recognition I hadn't experienced in years, like someone opening a window in a room I'd forgotten existed. I don't remember how long we sat like that, but eventually he reached out. Just a small gesture, his fingers brushing mine. He didn't pressure me. He just remained there, quiet and respectful, waiting for me to decide. I withdrew my hand, not from anger, but from fear. Fear of what I was feeling, fear of what it meant, fear of what would happen if I didn't. "I need some air," I said quickly, standing. "I'm going to check the garden." He nodded, not pursuing me, not making it more difficult. I stepped outside into the warm breeze, sunlight filtering through the leaves, the scent of jasmine filling the air. I stood there barefoot, staring at the bird feeder swaying gently in the afternoon light. My life had always been measured in orderly segments: tasks, schedules, meal planning, anniversaries. But this was chaotic. This was unpredictable. And it terrified me, because part of me wanted to open that door, part of me wanted to feel again, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. Not with him. Not with anyone. At least that's what I told myself. The next 2 days passed in a strange rhythm, like we were both holding our breath, waiting for something to change, but neither of us daring to force it. Michael remained mostly quiet, considerate. He kept occupied, reading on the back porch, helping me tend the herbs, even offering to repair the broken latch on the pantry door that David had promised to fix months ago. And I tried to maintain my distance, but occasionally I'd catch him watching me. Not in an inappropriate or crude way. It was gentler than that, thoughtful, curious, like he was trying to understand something about me, or maybe just waiting for me to understand something about myself. By Saturday afternoon, the house had grown heavy with silence. David was due, home in a few hours, and we both felt time running out. The storm from Thursday had left the air cool and still, and I found myself in the living room folding clean clothes while the television murmured in the background. Michael entered holding a small scrapbook I hadn't seen in years. "Found this on the bookshelf in the guest room," he said, holding it up. "Hope you don't mind looking." I smiled. "Not at all. That thing's older than dirt." He sat beside me and opened it across his lap. The pages were thick and yellowing, edges worn, the pictures faded but full of memories. There was one of David and me from our second anniversary, me in a blue dress, holding a lopsided cake we'd attempted to make together. "You looked so joyful," Michael said softly, studying the photograph. I paused, folding a shirt slowly. "I was." He looked up. "Are you still?" That question hit me like a pebble dropped in calm water. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I think I stopped asking myself that quite some time ago." Michael nodded and closed the album gently, setting it aside. "You deserve to be." I looked at him. Really looked at him. There was no pretense in his voice, no hidden agenda, just truth. "You're very kind," I said. "But kindness like that can be dangerous sometimes." He tilted his head. "Why?" "Because it makes people feel things they're not sure they should." His eyes didn't leave mine. "Feelings aren't wrong, Elena. What we do with them, that's the part we have to be careful about." My heart beat louder in my chest. I stood up, needing space, air, anything. "I think you should pack your things. David will be home soon." He didn't protest, just nodded quietly and rose from the couch. But as he turned to walk toward the hallway, he paused at the doorway and looked back. For what it's worth, this weekend meant something to me. Not just the quiet moments, the way you listened, the way you see people. It mattered. Then he was gone, the sound of his footsteps fading into the guest room. I sat back down, hands trembling slightly, unsure if it was from fear, regret, or something else entirely. I hadn't done anything wrong. Not technically. But emotionally? I knew boundaries had been blurred, feelings stirred. Parts of me that had been dormant for years had been awakened by someone I never expected. Someone too close. Too complicated. By the time David got home, Michael was already gone. He'd left a note on the kitchen counter, brief, neat handwriting. "Thank you for the kindness, the honesty, and the peace. I won't forget it. M." I folded it carefully and slipped it into the drawer beside the sink where old keys, receipts, and forgotten notes lived. That night, David told me all about his camping trip while I nodded and smiled, my hands folded properly, in my lap. But my thoughts were elsewhere. Not on Michael exactly, but on what he had awakened in me. A question, a yearning, a quiet ache I couldn't name yet. Something had shifted, and I wasn't sure if I wanted it to shift back. The days after Michael left felt both normal and quietly charged, like the air in the house still held some trace of him. I found myself looking at everything just a little differently. The silence of the mornings, the space beside me in bed, the lines on my face that I used to try to hide without thinking. It wasn't that I missed him. Not exactly. It was more that he'd opened something. A part of me I had stored away so carefully over the years for the sake of stability, marriage, maturity, for safety. One evening, a week later, I was in the garden kneeling by the tomatoes, pulling out weeds I'd let grow too tall. The sun was low, and the sky had that soft amber glow that made everything feel a little suspended in time. That's when my phone chimed. A text message. Michael Hope. I'm not overstepping. Just wanted to say I'm thankful for that weekend, and I hope you're well. I sat back on my heels, staring at the screen. My first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend none of it had happened, to tuck it all away like a passing storm. But I didn't. I replied, Me, I'm well. I've been reflecting a lot. Thank you for reminding me I still can. He didn't respond immediately, and I didn't wait for one. Just sending it felt honest, freeing in a way I hadn't expected. That night, after David had gone to bed, I sat in the living room with an old diary I hadn't opened in years. I flipped through page after page of who I used to be. Before marriage, before the routines, before I began defining myself only through others. There were entries about aspirations I'd forgotten I had, things I wanted to learn, places I wanted to visit, feelings I hadn't allowed myself to experience. I didn't write about Michael, I wrote about me. The next morning, over coffee, David noticed something different in my expression. You look refreshed, he said. I smiled. I feel clearer. He raised an eyebrow, curious, but not pressing, and I didn't elaborate. Some things weren't meant to be shared. Some things were private, not because they were shameful, but because they were sacred. A few weeks passed. Michael didn't text again, and I didn't expect him to. Whatever that weekend had been, it was a mirror, not a doorway. He wasn't the solution. He was the question. A question that changed me. One afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror in our bedroom and looked at myself. Not to criticize, not to fix, but just to see. And I did. I saw the woman I had become, a woman still capable of feeling deeply, of being moved, of growing. David came in from the yard, wiping his hands on a cloth. I was thinking, I said, turning to him, we should take that trip to the mountains, the one we always discussed but never organized. He looked surprised. Really? Now? Why not now? I said. What are we waiting for? He smiled, a little crooked, a little amused. You're serious? I nodded completely. And in that moment, I realized something. It wasn't about Michael. It never really was. It was about remembering that I still had the capacity to be surprised, even by myself. What happened that weekend wasn't a betrayal. It was an awakening. A quiet reminder that even in the stillness of a long marriage, in the comfort of a familiar life, there can be tremors. There can be questions that lead you back to yourself. And sometimes that's exactly what we need.